Tonight we have Guo Gu, who is a master of both the Gaodong and the Linji Chan tradition, the Chinese Zen tradition. And he's also a professor at Florida State University in Tallahassee. So we're very pleased to have him. I thought what we would do is perhaps just meditate for a few minutes first, and then we'll start with a reading, and then just see where we go from there. So let's just. Monk asked Hanzu, what about the ones who have gone? White clouds gather at the top of the valleys, and blue peaks lean into the empty sky. The monk then asked Hanzu again, what about the ones who return? Hair of white coming down through the streams in the valleys, coming through the clouds to the marketplace. What about the ones who have neither come nor gone? The stone woman leads them back from their dreams of the world. The stone woman leads them back, brings them back from their dreams of the world. Well, Master Guo Gu, thank you so much for making time for us. We know it's late already in Tallahassee there, and we really appreciate you visiting us, and we're looking forward to getting to know you better tonight. Basically, we'll be looking at Silent Illumination, which is a book that you published on Hongzu in 2021, last year. And Hongzu was really one of the great Zen teachers of the Song Dynasty, as most of you visitors, I think, know, and particularly well known for not only the fact that he revived the Gaodong, or the Soto school of Zen, Soto like Japanese Soto school of Zen, but really well known for his poetry. And we actually use his poetry as a koan. And the first thing that I read is a part of our miscellaneous koan collection. So I'd like to ask you, Guo Gu, if you could read perhaps something by Hongzu, maybe The Vacant Field on page 113.
All right. This is first of a series of writings on silent illumination in fascicle 6. This guy wrote a lot. He has 9 fascicles, chapters. Fascicle 6 is where most of this is drawing from. So let me read it. This vacant and open field is intrinsically present from the very beginning. You must purify and wipe away the various deluded conditioning and illusory habits. Naturally, you will arrive at a place that is clear and pure, perfect and bright, totally empty, without any image, resplendent and outstanding. It does not rely on anything. Only this vastness can illuminate the fundamental reality as external objects are relinquished. Therefore, it is said, with perfect clarity, there is not a single thing to be perceived. This field is where birth and death do not reach. It is a source of utter luminosity, able to emit light and respond clearly to the myriad dust motes of sensory objects. It is empty, without opposition. The wondrous activity of seeing and hearing leaps far beyond those everyday sounds and forms. In all situations, its functioning is without trace. Its mirroring is without obstruction. Mind and its objects naturally and spontaneously issue forth without partiality. An ancient said, having no mind, one attains in oneself the way of no mind. Actualizing no mind in itself, the way ceases to be. Advancing in such a way, you will be able to take up the responsibility of helping sentient beings with pure intent, as if you're sitting in perfect silence. As for the wondrous activity of leisurely entering the world, it is something you must investigate in this fashion. Yeah, quite beautiful. I must say, Hongzhi was a literary genius, so at a very young age he already exhibited great literary talent. He was primed to go to the route of becoming a literati. But then at a very young age, his family was Buddhist, so he wanted to become a monk. But that part of him remained and really flourished, actually. When he came to age, at a time of Northern Song Dynasty, which is the pinnacle development of Chan. The fusion of literary culture, great patronage, imperial sponsorship, vast collections of Chan writings. There's even a slogan, a technical term for that age, an emic term. That means that the people themselves, Chan practitioners themselves, coined that term. It's called the Chan of, or literary Chan, 文字 Chan. So it's really, during that time, he really flourished. And when, what happens when a literary genius becomes awakened is they write a lot. So we get all these words and metaphors and stuff like that. But
That's great. That's great. Well, you decided to take up the way at a very young age, 14, I think. You began to study with Sheng Yen, one of the famous great Zen masters, maybe of last century, certainly of Taiwan, China. Can you tell us about that a little bit? What made you begin to study Zen or Chan?
Okay. I know in your text it says 14, but it was around 10 or 11. Not that I'm, uh, well, I was born into a Buddhist family, and I was born in Taiwan. And my family happened to be very close to this ascetic meditation master. Not really Chan as in Chan school, but an ascetic. Primarily because my mother was a teacher, math teacher, and her student in this all-women high school became a nun. More than one, I think. So we used to just visit her, and she was close to the family, and then visit the master. So I was exposed to meditation around 4. I took refuge with this master Guangqing, and he's the one who first taught me how to meditate. And family migrated to the United States. A little bit, very brief time in California. We stopped there first, and then we decided to go to the East Coast, New York, and then settled there for several months, and then New Jersey. Yeah. And my mother wanted to find another teacher, and that's when she found Master Sheng Yen, through recommendation. So I met him when I was almost 11. And why did I take it up? It was kind of a very natural thing, I think it's very important for, children. They don't really need to know a lot about Buddhism and teachings and this and that. As long as they have a very good exposure to the Buddhist teachings and the temple life, the connection with people, that's sufficient. So it was a kind of natural thing. So when I met my teacher, I was really taken with his. He was not like other monks, solemn, and he was very lively, and he was humorous, kind of childlike. Certainly, the way he talked to me. So, he kind of joked around with me, and so I was kind of taken by that, and he kind of tricked me into night and go on retreat and meditate and so on. So it was an instant. Okay, it clicked. I really felt something from him. So that I would consider him my root teacher.
Mm. So you grew up in New Jersey, and then and you lived a very American life, but you were bicultural. I think you were going back and forth quite a bit. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So every week we would go visit him. My mother worked in New York City. She had a jewelry store in Manhattan. She had a storefront and company, and so we were in the city all the time. So every week we would go to the city and then stop by on the weekend to Master Sheng Yen's place in Queens, of all the places. And another world for New York, Manhattan people, like another state, kind of. Yeah. So he saw me grow up, to different phases of my life.
Yeah. Fascinating. So then, I want to ask it only because it's mentioned in Wikipedia and on your website. You were a professional musician, and you were hard rock, And so when was that? Was that after high school? And that's at least on the face of it, it seems like a world so far apart from the life of a monk.
Well, there's a lot of. Well, first of all, I wouldn't call ourselves professional because punk rock is It's very easy. You just pick up the instrument and you just start playing, you know. But I was marginalized, you know, living in Jersey, upper middle class. Everyone's a jock, you know, and there's no Chinese families. There's no black families except one Chinese family, my family. Wrong, a black family. So marginalized, bullied. And I kind of just self-marginalized with the misfits of the town, you know. And these misfits were into, which was my kind of kin, you know, became my kin, my brothers, sisters, were into, you know, early punk, like Clash, you know, Sex Pistols. But later on, we started forming a band, and I was in 6th grade. I was very young. 6th grade. 7th grade, we already had a band going, you know, middle school. In 7th grade, I was going to New York, going to see hardcore punk shows. By end of 7th grade, we were playing at CBGB's, you know, A7, you know, A Street, 7th Street, Avenue A, these punk places. And you know, we shaved our heads. We were what was called straight edge skinheads. Straight edge, no drug, no alcohol. But we were kind of militant, you know. You say it's kind of far apart, you know, only on the surface, because, you know, in looking back, you know, we were seeking something, you know, in the music, in the mosh pit, in the stage diving, it's a kind of transcendence.
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't really know it. I mean, we didn't even know the word transcendence probably, but it was an embodied expression of that the times, you know. And we're very close with the Hare Krishnas, actually, you know, because New York skinheads, many of them became Hare Krishnas. You know, that's where we get free food. You know, we hung out with them. The Hare Krishna in New York is different than anywhere else. They have tattoos of like punk rock bands on their body. So it was kind of, and then you know, my teacher saw me through all that. I still continue to practice with him, and then he would make jokes like your haircut. You know? Meanwhile, I'm thinking I'm cutting it for different reasons than you, you know, like, and then end of high school, I started to take Buddhism more seriously because everyone's going to Hare Krishnas. I thought maybe I should just explore Buddhism, and I picked up a book. And that was just knocked me out of took the rug right under me. It was What the Buddha Taught by Wapula Rahula. That turned my world upside down. All the teachings there seems like it flew from inside me. And you know, I shaved heads for different reasons then. After that again, you know, and I was still in a band, but then I was kind of getting ready for college and kind of leaving it behind. And so freshman year of college, and I stopped. Yeah. And just started doing retreats, editing for Chan magazine. And I lived in the city, but I went to the Queen's Temple. I live above a monastery, actually, in the city, at the edge of Chinatown and Little Italy, Center Street. You know, so I was really into it, and I majored in art. So I was integrating abstract fine art, paintings, And then I moved on to sculpture because I felt that people are viewers are outside. There's always this duality from my art. You're standing in front of it and you look at it. So I moved on to sculpture. Eventually, I moved to installation art. Mm-hmm. That's when I integrated really Buddhist ideas of emptiness and form and the interplay of the two into the installation. And then I just took the next step. After college, I was doing retreats like 4 times a year, throughout the college. And after I did senior year, and I just said, Shifu, I'm going to become a monk. And then that's what I did, basically. Yeah. So it was kind of natural, It's kind of one thing evolving to another.
Yeah, nice. In listening to some of your interviews and in your readings, humility was always a big thing for you. In fact, you mentioned specifically that humility was a gate to awakening for you, at least twice, I think, and even bowing. Can you tell us about how humility was a gate for you for awakening?
Humility coupled with a sense of wonderment. It was a naturally developed struggle within me. And as a young man, I had a lot of ideals and what I think practice is, how I think one should practice, ought to practice, and what all these romantic notions. And the humility was kind of brought on with certain incidents in the monastery, actually, in which I really felt a sense of contrition.
Was this monastery, was this in the States or was this back in Taiwan?
Taiwan.
Okay.
Home monastery. I travel with my teacher every 3 months, New York, and then Taiwan, New York, Taiwan, sometimes Europe. So it didn't really fit in any of the Sangha because my schedule was different than the other monastics. So it was kind of marginalized. And I was so close to my teacher. A Sangha member idealized me, just projecting a lot of stuff on me. And the relationship got murky, And my teacher decided one summer to just not bring me back to Taiwan with him. I'm not going to go into the details. Spare you the details. And I developed this contrition, and did everything I could, read the scriptures, practice meditation, until I just recalled something that he said to me some years ago. He said, body like a rag, mind like a mirror. He asked me a question, what is the mind for the way? What is the heart for the way? I gave him some stupid textbook answer. Basically, bodhicitta, that's what is that? And then he says, no. He says, body like a rag, mind like a mirror. And then I said, okay, my mind not like a mirror, but I can use this skin and flesh like a rag. I can do that. So I just plunged myself into offering myself. So humility for me was kind of offering myself. Things that people don't want to do, cleaning toilet, this, or going out to these universities in New York City, giving classes and all this stuff. I just offer myself, body like a rag. And I did repentance, prostrations. Hundreds, 500 a day. Frustrations. And then, the dis-ease that I felt, the momentum of the kind of wonderment. What is practice? Where am I going with this? What should I do? What have I done? All these coalesce. So humility, the sense of naturally developed, tied to my existence, this wonderment, just compacted, but it settled me. And I haven't sat for weeks in that state. I just exhausted my body. And then one evening, my room is right next to the Chan Hall. So passing by the Chan Hall, I saw my cushions. I'll sit. I sat down. I didn't even sit. I didn't even begin anything. I sat down. And, the wonderment and the unified state that I was in burst. That was the first time. Yeah. So I talked to my teacher about it. Different people find their own way. Everyone finds their own path. Yeah. Everyone's different. I know it's cliche to say this, but it truly is. And for me, humility, you can call it humility, you can call it offering. It's offering. Everything. That's very important for my practice. Yeah.
And what was the second experience of humility as a gate that you had?
Humility has been kind of ongoing. After speaking with my teacher, him and I felt that should continue this, this approach to practice. So it's continuous. Second time was during a retreat, at the end of a retreat. But it wasn't any specific instance. And then I think it was the fourth or fifth time when my teacher, this was in 2007, he was already stopped coming to New York, to United States. Bali, frail. Kidney. What do you call that? Washing the kidney? Dialysis.
Dialysis, yeah.
Dialysis. Both kidneys. Bad shape. Very weak, frail. And he was doing a 49-day retreat when I saw him. I've never seen him like that. Just in that way, just suddenly look up. He had people holding him to walk. And that kind of humility, shame. How did he get this way? Tirelessly traveling for 30 years for idiots like me and this small handful of Westerners in New York, traveling just to teach us. He could have stayed in Taiwan, or he could have just stayed in New York. And that was I think 2 weeks into the 49-day retreat. And in Chan we talk about great confidence, conviction, great vow, great determination, great wonderment. These ingredients, I've been practicing this, decades. I know that. But what kicked in the wonderment that I developed during that retreat? It was fragmented. It wasn't seamless. It wasn't continuous. And he wasn't taking interviews. The head monk was Master Guo Gu. He's like a fireball. He's like Lingji in incarnation. Short, chubby. It's like this powerhouse. So he was leading the retreat, and just seeing my teacher, the frail body, and still giving a talk in the evening, brought such a great humility, sense of contrition, shame. I know that Westerners, when they hear the word shame, it's, has this, Judeo-Christian baggage. This is without that, okay? It's just a sense of like, here's a person exhausting his life for the benefit of being. And we're here, just, am I worthy? Are we worthy of his time? And and all the Westerners I was in charge of, we sat in one corner. This corner, there's a lot of conditions happening. This corner, there's no ventilation getting into that corner. Everyone's complaining, giving notes to the timekeeper. So just all that, just thinking like, we're here complaining about that. And then here's this man, my teacher, my father, was just, and then after that, the sense of wonderment just kind of settled, became continuous. So that was the rock, kind of. I want to use the metaphor. That was a rock that just sunk down. It's like throwing a heavy rock right into the limpid autumn lake, and it just continued to go down. It's like that, right?
Let's in that regard, let's read a second Hong's poem, if that's okay, on multitasking, which is sort of the stepping out, which I see so much in your life as a teacher, stepping out into the world from that emptiness, picking up that stone, if you will,
Yeah, throwing at people. Once in a while, I get good catchers. All right, multitasking amidst chaos, manifesting in places of encounter. None of these are realms outside yourself. Heaven and earth share the same root. Myriad forms are of a single body, adapting to changes and transforming freely without being manipulated by those who curry favor. This is to actualize great freedom. Traveling like the wind, illuminating like the moon, encountering things without obstructions, then and there, while resting and retreating, you shoulder the responsibility. When wisdom flows and the principle is perfected, practice will be forgotten, but your role will be fulfilled without you being trapped with the needs for respect or honor. Entering the currents to be one with the dusty world, You transcend everything and shine in brilliance. Know that continuing in this fashion is genuine practice. But when there's discontinuity, there is no practice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for reading that. You know, I'm really interested. I'm sure people on the call are really interested to hear, how do you practice? We almost universally have received the teachings in Zen, which is meditation school of Buddhism, of course, through Japan, through Japanese filter. And you sort of represent a direct line back to some of the greatest teachers of the millennium, right? Back to the 12th century. Hongzi, who we're now reading, Dahui, Yuanwu, Wuzu. You mentioned earlier when we were chatting that you actually use Wato as a sort of a koan, a piece of a koan, really. And also you do use a kind of a shikantaza, a silent illumination. So could you tell us a little bit about that and explain to us exactly what silent illumination is?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to be able to talk about what silent illumination is. That's the wordless teaching. I can talk about our tracks and breadcrumbs. Silent illumination for Hongzhi is not a practice. Right? Irrespective of what we may think of Cao Dong, it's pronounced Cao Dong Chan, Soto Zen, through the lens of the kind of Japanese transmission. The way he wrote about silent illumination is he's just using this poetic metaphor to express in metaphorical ways, poetic ways, literary ways, the essence and function, particularly how awakening kind of navigates through life, how it responds to circumstances. So he doesn't really talk about methods of practice, and how that's linked. This is a very important point. How methods of practice are linked to particular lineage within Chan Zen. Never been the case. Never been the case in the Chan tradition, whether in Song Dynasty or before. That institutionalization of method with a sect with distinct features, that's an invention, later time. Right? Now, because if you look at the records of these masters before they practiced Chan, what were they actually doing? And you will see that they're practicing like Tian Tai stuff, Japanese Tendai stuff. They're practicing. Some of them have by the kind of sources that they cite, Hua Yan teachings, Yogacara teachings, so each of these Chan masters have their own idiosyncratic way of practicing. Now, this construct of Lingji associated with koans, Huatou, and Cao Dong associated with silent illumination, much, much, much later. Not even in China, in Japan. In China, Chan masters practice all kinds of methods and approaches. What they have shared in common is that they belong to a particular lineage, not institutionalized, and the lineage not connected to method, a shared body of teachings. You know? As for how they actually practiced, very little evidence. The glimpses that we have, they practice Hua Yan, Tian Tai. They used to be like Deshan, the guy that hit. You know, Ling Ji is the guy that yelled. You know, Deshan is the one that.
Deshan, yeah.
He was a commentator to the Diamond Sutra. This guy carried his Diamond Sutra around, right? Until an old granny put him to his place, right? So, you know, they come from all walks of life. You know. And another fantasy, you know, Da Hui criticizes Hong Zhi, you know, the Ling Ji Cao Dong debate. Nonsense. Because anyone who actually read the literature of not Da Hui, not Hong Zhi only, but what were people doing in the Northern Song Dynasty, in that transition into Southern Song Dynasty? What were they writing? Who were talking like that? A silk thread. Be a dry, rotten tree stump. One thought for 10,000 years. Be like an incense burner, lifeless in a dilapidated temple. Or be like an imbecile. Who was talking like that? Da Hui's own teacher. Yuan Wu. In Japanese would be Engo. He was the single most high-profile masters during that time that consistently, I'm talking consistently, used those expressions to describe the meditation practice, to dismantle the discriminating mind, so one can work on the huatou, so one can really dig into the koan, you know. So, out of all the discourse records, and I've read them, who was the single master that consistently talked like that? Da Hui's own teacher. And Da Hui's Dharma brothers, who inherited how Yuan Wu used to talk, they talked like that. You know, when Da Hui came out of his solitary retreat after the fall of the dynasty, Southern Song Dynasty began, when he came out, 1134, the first person, two people that he criticized was his own Dharma brothers from the Lingji line, who talked like silent illumination. That was before Hong Zhi even used that term. Right? So, retroactive, projecting from 18th century Japanese Zen debates, Hakuin and his interlocutors from Soto Zen projected right back into China in the Song Dynasty. Doesn't exist.
I found that Empty Cloud, who was your great-grandfather, someone, Xun Yun, right? Xu Yun. He was very eclectic. He was doing all kinds of things, Tian Dai, and then it was only towards the end of the book that, he was holding records, or he wrote records of Chan retreats and koan work and that sort of thing. So I found that very fascinating, how really Chan in China was much more like that. So would you attach yourself to a teacher rather than a lineage, or you would go and it was very important for you to find your specific teacher?
Yeah, people traveled. There's specific kind of travel routes of itinerant Chan practitioners. That's another thing that's kind of unique. So we see records of that. Now,
in vast distances, we're talking hundreds of miles walking.
Right? They just sojourn to different mountains, different monasteries, following different teachers. Now, the fascinating thing is, Unlike Japan, where particular school of Chan or any other school of Buddhism is tied institutionally to a building, to a temple. If this is a Ringzai monastery, it would never change to a Soto monastery or a Nichiren monastery. So its temple is tied. In China, the monasteries are not tied. So 4 years you have a Taodong master. 4 years later is a Lingji master. Now, can you imagine 500 monks, 1,000 monks practicing in those places are up, time to move because our teacher changed. They practice, so it's not tied, you see. So they stayed in the monastery and practice. And if they want to sojourn, they could sojourn in other places. They're not tied. So they're not tied to temples, not tied to lineage, not tied to sects. Methods, people practice all kinds of stuff. So how does one practice silent illumination? One could cull from the writings of Hongzhi, even though it's not about practice, cull from them some principles to practice. That he makes it clear. Focus on uncontrived, fixation or rigidity on things. Very clear. No matter what you do, clarity. Right? So he expresses responsiveness to things, right? Illumination, right? And the stillness of practice. So there is a way to kind of practice silent illumination, but different teachers taught it differently.
And silent illumination is not exactly, or you see it as exactly as shikantaza, just sitting, the Japanese Soto practice.
The way I see it is shikantaza. It translates to just sitting, but it has a particular flavor because shikan, or just sitting, the just part. In Chinese, that has a particular nuance. It's almost like just mind your own business. It has that flavor. So when you put it in taza, striking up sitting, it really has this flavor of don't mind anything else, just mind yourself sitting. So that to me is a very literal, descriptive way of what is actually happening in sitting. Whereas silent illumination, it's just Hongzhi's, this guy's a literary genius. It's just him, going on about, these poetic metaphors, talking about the functioning of wisdom, you see. Selfless functioning. So silent would be selfless, illumination would be responsiveness. So it's not really apple to apple, right? Shikantaza is more like what you're actually doing, like concretely, like what are you doing, right, when you're sitting? Well, you just mind yourself sitting. You don't mind the breath, you don't mind sound, you don't mind the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. What are you doing? Sitting. Who's sitting? You don't worry about that. The body's sitting, mind is sitting. Whereas silent illumination, it's so open. It's not descriptive. It's poetic.
Yeah.
It's not even tied to a method.
Yeah.
Not even tied to a form, like sitting. So it's non-abiding.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you can't really compare the two.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, tell us about Watto practice, your Watto practice, and maybe how has Watto developed through the centuries in China? And do you feel like you inherited that? Our practice, which we love, and we have over 100 miscellaneous koans that we've taken from here and there, but we also use the Gateless Barrier, we use the Blue Cliff Record, we use Book of Serenity. But our method, in many ways, came from probably Hakuin, But I'm really interested in knowing, where did your method come from, and what was the development post Song dynasty of Watto and Chan in China?
It's a great question. It's a great question. Speaking with John earlier, he asked the question, is there really precedence in this curriculum business, this capping phrases? Yes. Northern Song Dynasty, which is the pinnacle of literary Chan.
So capping, just to explain capping phrases, that's writing a short poem as an answer, as an added answer to a koan. Is that correct?
Added answer or comment or pointers, right? So Northern Song Dynasty is this affluent civilization, the pinnacle in which Chan was really imperially sponsored for the first time, designating which monastery is Chan Monastery. It's not lineage affiliated, but actually monastery, for the first time designated as Chan Monastery. Abundance of collections of sayings of earlier masters, comments on those in prose form, in verse form. It was something that Chan masters of all lineages participated, not tied to one particular school. Okay, so that's the pinnacle. So, and people start to memorize that. At the fall of the dynasty, that transition in which the northern Jurchens came and took over half of Song China, it was a kind of great crisis on multiple levels: political, institutional, social, civil, familial, individual identity, particularly for the educated elite. And prior to this, they were searching, they were, memorizing, collecting, writing prefaces for these great Chan masters, collections, and dabbling themselves, composing Chan poems, a great flourishing of Chan art. Right? So it was a crisis, kind of like an awakening, in which there was an inward turn. They were faced with the imminent threat that even the Southern Song Dynasty was going to be taken over by the Jurchens. Right? So in this crisis, Da Hui dismantled, because of his charisma, his literary connections, political connections, basically single-handedly dismantled this whole trajectory of capping phrases, commentary on koans, in which Blue Cliff Records really the epitome of that. Prose, introductory prose, and then capping phrases, and then interlinear commentary on commentaries. He just basically just dismantled all of that. And
did he actually burn all of the printing blocks that his master had gotten together for the Blue Cliff record?
The received tradition says he did. And this was a contemporary observation by other Chan masters writing, mentions that. So in historical work, we can't just take a text and at face value. We got to look at it from the cultural, social dimension, and critics, and other writers. So when other writers start to, not related to Chan, not related to Da Hui's lineage, when they start to comment on Da Hui burning, you can probably bet that this guy probably burned the xylographs to the Blue Cliff record. So it went possibly out of circulation. This part is there's a gray area, but certainly, decades later, it was recirculated after Da Hui passed away. It was recirculated, and the preface to that edition talks about Da Hui burning too. So it's he probably did something like that, and that's very dramatic by any standard in the Confucian society of filial piety. It's just not done. Your own teacher, and mind you, what I said before, who talks like silent illumination, more so than Hongzhi, who talks like be an incense burner in the temple, dilapidated temple, one thought for 10,000 years, his teacher. So there's some story that needs to be unpacked, and we just don't have the pieces.
And then how did things develop in going into the Yuan, the Ming, the Qing, and later, and ultimately to you?
Yeah, so, Southern Song Dynasty, no matter which lineage of Chan, we see Chan masters using Huatou because of Da Hui. He dismantled the whole commentarial tradition, although it was beautiful, very useful. I'm sure many people derive benefit from it, but basically it was a paradigm shifter. So he shifted the whole paradigm to the condensed form, readily accessible in a time of social political crisis of identity for the educated elite, his students. He designed this Huatou practice. Now, it's not to say he created it, because Yuan Wu, Blue Cliff Record, his teacher, he already taught Huatou practice, but it's really Da Hui that amplified that. So by the Yuan dynasty, subsequent dynasty, and by the late Ming dynasty, we have evidence of even Cao Dong masters are using Huatou. Now, from the Chan tradition, it's not really surprising because Chan is not tied to a method anyway, right? But it must be kind of head scratching for Japanese Zen. Was what? The Soto master is practicing this, So, but if you look at pre-Hakuin Japanese Soto masters of the 14th century, Hakuin's 18, right? 14th century, 15th century. What were they doing, Soto monk? They're writing commentary on the gateless barrier. That's what they're doing. So something is happening. They were probably more closer to what the Chinese monks were doing. And doing that revolution, kind of reinvention of the tradition in the 18th century. That is what the current Japanese Zen tradition have inherited, right? I mean, prior to the 18th century, the Japanese Soto monks, I hate to say this, but no one really read Dogen. It's like collecting dust on the bookshelf. What were they doing? The latest fashion. What Chinese monks are doing. What were they doing? Commentary on koans. They're creating a secret, it's called misan in Japanese. Kind of esoteric, secret investigations. Soto monks of Mumonkan circulating. So there's some studies on that.
Do you think they were just commentary, or were they using Wato? Were they actually using the koans, embodying, or just talking about them?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's some scholarship that suggests that secrecy was very prevalent during that time in Japan. So a lot of different traditions have developed their own kind of esoteric understanding of different texts within their own tradition, mixing it with esoteric, like Shingon stuff. So these.
So let me ask you. how do you use Wato with your students? How would you? I come into the Doksan room, and now you're going to give me a koan. How do you tell me or us to use the koan?
So the tradition passed down to my generation through my teacher and his teacher is that by that time everyone is using Huatou, and my teacher was the one that revived a practicable form of silent illumination. But regarding Huatou, we really work with students kind of closely. So the teacher and student, everyone starts off with working with the breath of some sort, some way, until the teacher get to know the student, the kind of idiosyncrasies, the inclination, the way the student kind of work, thinks. Then the teacher in our tradition would sign either after the breath work, either silent illumination or Huatou. And the Huatou, because the Master Sheng Yen, he focused on only several, right? So one is what is Wu,
Mm-hmm.
who's dragging this corpse around. All the myriad dharmas return to one. What is the one return to?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like these kind of variations. Who's reciting the Buddha's name? That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So my teacher really inherited that
Mm-hmm.
the early stage in his career. Then he shifted to what is Wu.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Primarily because he found...
And the first case of the gateless barrier, right? So, yeah. Okay. Jiao Zhou's dog, right? Yeah.
Jiao Zhou's dog, Da Hui's own favorite. One of the reasons is that he found like who's dragging this corpse around, who's reciting this name, this who
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
produce side effects. Like who am I? Side effects.
Mm-hmm.
Side effects of something that practitioners can actually hold on to, you see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to cut that off.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he reduced to something that's completely ungraspable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he resorted to what is Wu, which is just absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does a dog have Buddha nature? No. Well, why not? This no is not a yes and no, not that no. What the heck is it? It's completely unfathomable. And he favored that one towards the end of his life. So I inherited that. So basically I used that, but I also used this other Gong'an or Huatou that in recent years I started to use. And that is, someone asked Yunmen, where do Buddhists come from? East Mountain, walks on water.
I know somebody who's that's their favorite koan on this call. Yeah. I'd like to open it up. I'd like to hear about your Dharma relief in a moment, but let me open it to John Tarrant and Allison Atwell, if you may have questions for Guo Gu.
Yeah, I am the person who John mentioned who uses the East Mountain walks on the water. It was very funny. So, it's very heartening to hear you for me, because the sort of there's a broad generosity that I think is perhaps is in Chinese culture, and if it's going to work, you'll try it, and you have this tremendous discipline, and so the quality of, well, maybe this other odd thing might help, maybe something that's from some other tradition or Taoism or who knows, and so the generosity of not being very strictly labeled is really encouraging to us, because we've thought, well, in having to survive in the modern world, which is going through a crisis just like the song did to us, and so So we need both the rigor of the work, the true deep work, but also anything that will work, I'm it's lovely to hear you, and the I guess I want to ask, do you and the Japanese were very into measuring like whether people, what depth of awakening people had with their Wato, and I don't know, it sort of makes my feelings hurt after a while. So, but although there's some, you can tell when something has happened that's big, and I wonder where you are with all that. What do you do in the Chinese tradition?
Yeah. Well, thank you. As you said, John has this flavor of maybe it is Taoism, in the indigenous tradition. So he has this kind of flexible openness to it. It's not really tied to this and that. In terms of its attitude towards seeing self-nature, awakening, there's also no measuring stick, but it's a kind of, for the practitioner, it's a kind of ruthless honesty with oneself. Whether there are traces of vexations, habit tendencies, these subtle undercurrent things that's happening, whether the self is present or not when we relate to others. So in that sense, there's shallowness and depth, and there's a whole range of possibilities. So the shallow ones would be like a glimpse of self-nature, which really has no effect whatsoever. It's like a memory. It has really no transformative effect, and it can definitely be made into a thing for the mind to hold on to it. That's the problem with ourselves, our sense of self. We make everything into a thing. So these experiences, grasping comes back and make it into a thing. So these glimpses, in the early years, my teacher used to congratulate people, but he found that they have no foundation. So they do all kinds of crazy stuff after that. So he stopped congratulating people. So he no longer count them as even genuine experiences. So a more in-depth one would be lasting, days, weeks, or even months, and it is only in those circumstances in which the wisdom of selflessness will actually come to life. Because in those circumstances, you can pretty much guarantee in our busy life that some crap is going to happen to you while you're in that, interacting with people, difficulties, and the responsiveness of that state. That's when wisdom comes to life. So if a person just have a glimpse, then it doesn't really do anything. Right? So in our tradition, probably cannot pick up the same huatou again. If one has a breakthrough, to pick it up again, it just doesn't have that, punch. So one would work with the teacher, another one. Not in a curriculum form, but something spontaneous happen in life, something the teacher shouldn't make up, like situational, or something the teacher jolt the student into something, and then they will continue to work on Huatou, or they may segue into silent illumination to deepen, and then come back to Huatou. So it's very flexible, and then the insight would have to be again and again and again and again and again and again, until the it's kind of self-referential diminishes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like there's a lot of clinical intelligence in that. I think, where you just notice what's needed and respond as best you dare and best you can. And I think that the thing about, like, it's wonderful to have all the chaos that can happen after people have had a big experience, or after, and so they have to survive themselves and the misuse of, or their mistakes or something. I'm very touched by your comments on humility and modesty, that to defend against knowing stuff and solidifying things.
Yeah. I think more and more these days that the infrastructure, the foundation must be there. Because sometimes people have these kind of breakthroughs, they don't even practice anything. They just kind of suddenly just stumble into something. Those experiences, my teacher called it a blind cat catching a dead mouse. It just happens, just stumble and you didn't actually work your way to catch a mouse. You just kind of just tripped over it, So to fall back from those experiences, one needs a foundation. So my teacher, the three higher learnings: precept, meditation, wisdom. These three are essential for my teacher. That's like the core of what he perceived to be with the Dharma, and the support, really, support. And precept for him was not it's not something rigid, it's something quite alive, and it's something to practice. And we're always stumbling, making mistakes, breaking precepts, and pick ourselves up again. He used to say, precepts are kind of meant to be broken. If you uphold the precept perfectly, there's no need for that anymore. So it's inevitable. But pick yourself up, engage in practice, learn something from that, and move on. So that infrastructure is so important. Without it, it's just this disembodied, kind of glimpses that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's clear the precepts are not rules so much as embodied practices we step into, and there's definitely a Huatou quality to them too. They're an environment you step into.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? May I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So, when you wrote when you wrote the blurb for my book, Passing to the Gateless Barrier, in our email correspondences, you said, "Welcome to Koanville." Do you remember that?
Probably.
So I would like to know a little bit about how, in your teaching, you transmit the Goan, and how you work with students.
It's surprisingly like what you've just said, that really we like to have people have some sort of basic koan that would be a Huatou. Probably, it could be the koan no, which we translate out of wu or mu, or it could be one of the other big ones like that. And what's your original face before your parents were born? Something.
Yeah.
The great classics, and really then talk to the person, and then they come back and they say whatever they say. I can't stand this. Good. So but I think there's this purifying and transforming effect that just over the could be years or over the time of just doing the work. And I don't know. You've made me think. Oh, maybe I've shortchanged shikantaza. Just listening to you now. But I usually use the koans because that way people have got something to engage with, and they're not just dreaming. So it's, in the beginning level, I think that's really important. But then when people do have some people they just need to do that for years and years or decades or something like that. So I try to. And then I try to work with them about whatever disruptions or eruptions, like the con's got to be useful for your life, in some way. You can't be yelling. If you've got a kid, you can't be yelling at your kid and be a good con student kind of thing, Or if you do yell at the kid, you've got to consider the matter, in some way and include the con. So, and then in later work, people start having breakthroughs, and I think in a way to sort of not get in the way. And you said about praising too much. Actually, the Japanese teachers used to want us to have a ceremony in the meditation hall as soon as somebody had a breakthrough with the first koan.
Wow.
I'd have all these checking questions. What is the height of mu or wu, or, what that sort of thing, and we just thought that was really dopey. So, it just didn't work in our culture because it created envy and so on. But also, I didn't think it was good. I was one of the people who had one of those ceremonies. I was one of the last people in my temple to have one. But I just thought wasn't quite right. That wasn't my task. Wasn't to stand on stage. My task was actually to go down and be like that. So anyway, but deepening it in some sort of quiet way is really helpful, and that would be we usually use more koans for that. And the teacher usually quite a lot of koans, but whether that's absolutely necessary, I've never. So. I don't think saturating in your life, so it's just there in your life, and there's no time you're not meditating, really. It depends what you. Sad or dying or whatever.
Yeah. Do you have a curriculum?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we use the Blue Cliff and the Book of Serenity, as Jon was saying, and the Mumakan. Miscellaneous cons are just, in a way, miscellaneous cons are sort of work at, training wheels. I mean, they're big cons, but they're things like, put out the fire across the river, that sort of thing. The teacher came to Japan later, but he was referring to the Jurchen fires across the Great River. So, so he's referring to the collapse of the dynasties, as you mentioned.
So the miscellaneous koan, are you referring to entangling vines?
Oh no, entangling vines. No, that's just entangling vines is it is a miscellaneous collection, so it could. But no, the miscellaneous koans. There's a whole lot of koans that are sort of, in a way, emptiness and form. They're like go straight on a narrow mountain road with 99 bends. They're a whole you find yourself in a stone crypt. The doors are locked from the outside, and you do not have your mobile phone. How will you get out? How will you get out? That kind of thing, And so they're very much the goose in the bottle. The woman raised the goose in the bottle, and get out without breaking the bottle or hurting the goose. That kind of thing. So they're very much the transformations, and they're not. I don't know. They're sort of. If you think you understand something, then you'll find out they'll completely overdo one of them, and one that's just like 3 centimeters to the right or something. There's a prize, and people can't do it, so it's great in that way. So,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. For good or ill, that's what we do.
Good. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I just say again how encouraged it's really heartening when you talk, and just the depth of your study and thoughtfulness about this, the way you gather things from all possible resources. It's just really moving.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Guo Gu. So usually this is where we end it, unless there are any burning questions amongst the crowd. Maybe we'll take one chat or two if anyone wants to send a question in. So I did want to ask you real briefly, maybe just a few minutes, and I know it's not enough time to spend on it, but tell us about Dharma Relief. You were pretty instrumental in raising over $100,000 to buy surgical masks for people in the very early days of the pandemic, and I think we were kind of on the edge of that. We really appreciated the work that you were doing there.
Thank you. When we began, it was filling the gap. You remember when there was a gap of time in which even automobile companies were trying to make masks because so much demand, not enough masks. So during that gap, Dharma Relief was formed as a grassroots organization that bring together different teachers, different Dharma centers, monasteries in the Buddhist tradition to address this issue. And we raised not only 100,000, we raised actually 600,000. And we were able to purchase 1.2 million masks directly from FDA approved manufacturers in China. That time also there was tension between China and US. So China produced more than half of the globe's FDA, PPEs, right? But because of this political tension, the US didn't really import masks from China. So we approached, the manufacturers themselves and directly UPS'd it to different hospitals in the United States. And we were working with the Bodhisattva from Pacific Zen Institute, who helped us, like other different centers in North America, to contact local hospitals and how many masks they need and so on. So it was a work that kind of just manifested. Everyone came together, and we're very grateful for all that support. And then George Floyd happened, 2020. He passed away, murdered in May, and became the formation of Dharma Relief 2, which is again bringing Dharma teachers together, addressing racial healing. But this time, we invited Black Dharma teachers to come together to be the core of DR2. And white Dharma teachers, myself also, positioned to support what was most needed. And we did a survey of Black Dharma practitioners, teachers, and what was actually needed. We finally came up with the idea of establishing fellowship, financial support, kind of like a universal guarantee income, base salary idea inspired by that, to fund them for a duration of 1 year, like a fellowship. So they would be fellows, and they could use that money to support their travel, the Dharma retreat, anything that they want. So we are rolling out this program. We stuck together for 2 years, over 2 years, refining. And we're going to roll it out after Christmas, announcing it so people Black Dharma teachers and practitioners can apply to become fellows of this art too.
Mm.
So please keep an eye out open. We hope that we have your support to kind of spread the word. And
please keep us on the list. And East Mountain Walks on Water, wonderful, wonderful work. So, Guo Gu, thank you so very much. We're going to end with the 4 vows. I think Jordan is on the call here. He's one of our wonderful cantors. Has to unmute Jordan.
Thank you for this occasion, for this invitation.
It's wonderful to have you, Guo Gu. Really, really appreciate it.
I just want to mention that Jordan used to play in a metal band.
Still do. I used to get chased by the hardcore kids back in the day, though. I was a skate punk, drinking beers in the parking lot.
Thank you.
I vowed to wake all the beings of the world. I vowed to set endless heartache to rest. I vowed to walk through every wisdom gate. I vowed to live the great Buddha. I vowed to wake all the beings of the world. I vowed to set endless heartache to rest. I vowed to walk through every wisdom gate. I vowed to live the great Buddha way. I vow to wake all the beings of the world. I vow to set endless heartache to rest. I vow to walk through every wisdom gate. I vow to live the great Buddha way.
Thank you, Jordan. Beautiful. And thank you again, Guo Gu and John Tarrant for coming on. He's got a terrible cold, but we couldn't keep him away. So, and I'm glad for that.